Back, Busters. We're here again for another character rifting video leading into our first epic group and adventure of Fall of Plaguestone. So far, we've done one-on-ones with the players and the characters, give you an idea where their concept comes from and their thought process and their ideas behind their characters. We're doing something a little different this time because two of our players, executive producer Buster One, and his niece Dana, who's also one of our players, they have decided to have integrated backgrounds for their characters. So we decided to focus a little bit on the process of kind of how you go about that if you're interested. Now, just because they're related doesn't mean that they have to necessarily be related as characters, and I'm interested to hear how they're going to pan that out. But for any players coming to the table, this is the kind of conversation that happens around session 0. If you don't have a public forum for your group to speak to one another, when you finally do your session 0, that's the time when you want to say, hey, I'm open to the idea of having an integrated background with someone else. And that's when, hands get raised and things get going. So we will start first, age before beauty, or is it beauty before age? Probably beauty before age. Well, we're going to start with Dana. Let's talk about your character first. Let's talk about your concept. You have played role-playing games before. You have played a couple of one-shots. You haven't had the pleasure of being in a campaign-style play, because that's really tough to get those things together. Certainly. And you've never played Pathfinder before, but you've played Dungeons and Dragons. Is that correct?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, great.
Worst time to stop. Sorry. Yep. No, that's correct. I played a one-off on Dungeons and Dragons a couple times. Never got involved in Pathfinder or anything like that. I think that's really the only tabletop game I've either sat in on or touched into.
Perfect. So you fit into the category of have rolled the bones, but just not this flavor of game yet. So that's awesome. So let's talk about your character. What as you looked at the book, as you looked at the rule book, and you started absorbing the ancestries and the classes in the backgrounds, what did you gravitate towards? What was the strongest thing that pulled you in, Dana?
Well, I started off knowing that I wanted a character that would be cute. I wanted something short. So I was immediately looking at the short characters. I wanted something magical. And so as I was reading through, I saw the gnomes. I liked the way they looked because I also wanted it cute. We were talking about goblins, and although I can definitely embody some goblin energy, I wanted something way cuter. So I did the gnome, excuse me, and I decided on doing the Fey Touch gnome, just because I liked the magical aspect of it. Nothing else really.
Okay. What's the name of your character?
Well, when I was reading through, it said that typical names for gnomes were really long, that parents will just start throwing crazy shit out there, which I thought was super hilarious. But they also said that the shorter the name, the more feminine the name. And I also didn't want to forget my own character's name. And then I was telling Mark earlier that I was kind of worried about not registering when someone says my character name and just being off my own little world. You know what I mean?
Right, so, right. Oh, that's me. That's me. Right.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So I was a little worried about that. But so as I was reading through all the gnome history, it was also talking about how there are a few certain like deities that are like well worshipped throughout the gnomes and whatever. And so I thought it would be cool. I saw one that was named Desna. And I was like, that's short, starts with a D. It'll probably trigger monkey brain, and I'll respond somehow. And I thought it would be cool to have her named after the deity that her parents worshipped. Not, heavily or anything like that, but just
nice. So sort of like paying homage to the god, because that's what the house worships.
She was, if I'm not mistaken, she was the deity of like luck and travel and just about like freeness and having good times kind of thing, like exploring and things like that. So all of it kind of, I looked through a few of the different deities in the book, and I liked that one anyways for the name, and I liked it just because of what she stood for. So
Okay. All right. Cool. I'm digging it. Does Desna have a last name? Have you resonated on a good sounding Nomi last name or not yet?
I haven't figured one out.
Okay. Cool. Doesn't have to be.
I kind of wanted to look into it more, and honestly, the thought of a last name did not pop into my brain until this morning. So I kind of forgot that I would maybe need one, to be honest with you, until this morning. But I'm going to think on it. I definitely want to do something way more ridiculous since I have a nicer first name.
Fantastic. All right. So you're settled on gnomes. They're cute. They're small. Fey touch gives you that whole, fairy aspect and whatnot. In Galarian, the setting that we're playing in, gnomes are generally represented by ridiculously colorful appearances. Their hair, their clothes, generally their hair. They wear their hair in crazy colors, and sometimes even multiple colors. So there's this thing called the whitening, that when a gnome starts getting tired with life late in their age, because they're essentially immortals, they lose interest in life and their hair turns white, and shortly thereafter they just stop being here. It's kind of hard, part of that process, part of the mysteries of Galarian. But so you may find her on the spectrum of being incredibly colorful and standing out in some of those aspects as well. Especially Desna, the symbol of Desna is the butterfly. Usually represented in purples and blues, but I mean, a butterfly could be any color you want it to be. All right, cool. So we have.
So I just want to say, in relation to that, I did read through all that. I saw the whitening or the bleaching. I thought, I can't remember exactly what it was called, but I read about that, and so they mentioned in the book that your hair color is basically any color besides white. So I thought all that was cool. And I also, when I first started out, I kind of had an image of the character that I wanted in my head anyways. And I had actually drawn out a character after we had done like our first original with just me, you, and Mark, sorry. I had drawn up this little character and I had colored it in and everything. And I kind of was like modeling my character after that character design. And ironically enough, she does have pink and purple hair and blue eyes. So it kind of like fits the bill perfectly already for.
Do we get to see it?
Once it's more refined, so I've got
great art is never complete. Great art is never complete. It's only
I know. I've got this great hair and this great face going on. It's a little chibi character because I've been super into drawing chibi.
Show us. We like chibi.
Well, hold on. I don't want to show you guys yet because I can't. I'm not used to drawing like armor and stuff like that. And so right now she just has on like this basic clothes.
All the time. Even Pathfinder.
All right, so getting back to the character sheet, your ancestry is gnome, your heritage is Fey touch, so we can fill that in on the sheet. So let's go to background while we fill that in. What were you thinking as far as a background? What did you gravitate towards? What makes sense for Desna?
I really loved either Animal Whisperer or Fortune Teller.
Which two?
Animal Whisperer or Fortune Teller.
Okay. So part of this was to change gears, and I'll be quiet here in a second. Part of this for me, I want to play a goblin. I have his name figured out, and I want him to be fairly diminutive, meaning very short. For those that don't know that word, I actually had to look it up to make sure I was using it correctly, but diminutive does mean extremely short. So
most people would know that because it's actually a mechanical term for a character's size in Pathfinder. So
copy that. So I'm the dork that didn't know that. So there
I didn't know, so I'm glad you clarified.
So all I've figured out for Simon, my character's name is Simon, is that he's a goblin and he's related. He has a connection to Desna. And that's all I have so far.
A goblin with a connection to Desna. Okay.
Meaning the character, not the goddess or god. Right. Meaning Dana's character.
So I was wondering, do you guys think that will be confusing, or do you think that will be an issue? to have me named after a deity?
I think it's perfectly fine. I think throughout history, many examples of people naming their children after, after messiahs, after deities, after gods, after, the sons of gods, to be specific. So I think that's totally in line. In line, and will probably be something fun we can play with in game. And I'm sure as you meet people, they will interact with that fact because you're named after a god.
And that's what I kind of figured. I thought it might be a cool thing when I possibly meet other gnomes that are well aware of the deity or other people that worship the deity. I'm sure more than just gnomes worship her or whatever. So I thought that would be like a cool insert.
Yeah. So your gnome, I assume she's female or male?
Female.
Okay, so your gnome, she comes from a family that was faithful to Desna. That was a strong presence in your upbringing. Obviously, if your parents named you after the god, does your class or your background reflect that as well? Or is that just one small aspect of your character? Or do you see it being much more integrated into those other aspects?
I don't see her being very religious.
Okay.
So I think the whole relationship with the deity, her being named after her and everything, I think she'll still follow her, what's the word? Her things, you know what I'm trying to say? She's still gonna follow the goddess's key points. She works travel and stuff like that. You know what I mean? Yeah. So that's gonna be one of the key points in her life. But I'm not gonna portray her or her family as very religious.
Understood.
She follows maybe the main tenets of the religion.
Yeah. Okay.
But is not strict. Does not strictly adhere.
Right.
So I would say that fortune teller, between those two, I think fortune teller fits that bill a whole lot better as a background.
Okay.
And the first thing that comes to mind, as Mark was saying, he wants some kind of connection to your background. The first thing that comes to mind is either you read Simon's fortune, or maybe you read your own fortune that showed the appearance of a goblin in some manifestation. You guys can riff out what that story means and how that played out. But that could be the connection. The fortune teller part could be the connection that brought the two of you together. Maybe you impressed Simon with your great powers of precognition and your great powers of divination, and he was so impressed that he's been hanging out with you ever since. The great and powerful Desna. Look at her. She can tell the future. That kind of thing. So that it could be that kind of a relationship base. But I think fortune teller is definitely pretty damn cool. I like that fit. So let's talk about the last key part of that is your class. So what class do you think fits with your Fey Touch Gnome fortune teller?
I assumed probably sorcerer.
Perfect.
So that's what I was gonna go for, was sorcerer. I figured that the whole thing had an animal whisperer or fortune teller.
With a Fey bloodline or something more complicated?
I'm open to something more complicated. I try to kind of keep everything a little simple for myself, just because this is my first time making an in-depth character like this. So I wanted to still stay open to suggestions.
I would say if you want that super integration with Fey, to go with a Fey bloodline with your sorcerer, because you'll find that the powers and the spells that you kind of gravitate towards will have some serendipitous kind of symmetry, right? With everything else, because you're a gnome, because you're a Fey Touch gnome. So you will find benefits that way.
Okay.
Also, if you want to go the other way, look at the available bloodlines. You may want to go for something weird and crazy. And that might explain why, besides the fact that you're a fortune teller, maybe you've got some weird wackadoo bloodline that made the other gnomes from your home kind of feel a little weird, a little awkward. You're not like other gnomes. Maybe you're a little gothy. Maybe you're a little on the gothy spectrum for being a gnome, and your bloodline reflects that and ties in your fortune teller, and you could do something a little darker and a little weirder and do like a contradiction. I love characters with contradiction. Like you've got fae and sunshine and rainbows and nature and darkness and shadow. And, I kind of like that contradiction. So I would say look at the bloodlines available and
so where can I look at the bloodlines?
The archives of Nethys are considered are the online official SRD for Pathfinder 2. So if you look that up, or if you just look for SRD for Pathfinder 2, you'll get pointed back to the archives of Nethys. You'll see that they cover both Starfinder, Pathfinder 1, and Pathfinder 2. So at the top heading, you click on the banner of the rule set you want to be paying attention to, and it switches you into that. So just make sure you're in the middle, which is Pathfinder 2, when you're looking up that kind of stuff. And just do a search for Sorcerer Bloodlines, and it will give you every single one that is currently available and legal in the game with the products that are out right now. And we're playing wide open. Everything that's legal is available to you guys.
Okay.
Are none of these in the book, Mike? Just sheer curiosity.
Well, there are bloodlines listed in the core rulebook in the sorcerer section, but they've also expanded on it with the advanced player's guide. And as Paizo releases new products, oftentimes it's both fluff and crunch, right? They'll release setting stuff. They'll release good stories and great descriptions and all kinds of that stuff. But then they'll be like, here's some extra bloodlines. Here's a new thing for barbarians. Here's a new thing for this class. So they're constantly adding on options for players to have to play. So
the first set's in the book, and then there's an extended set online. Am I thinking about it right?
Well, if you look up bloodlines at Archive of Nethys, you will see everything.
You see everything
because they're up to date, and they put everything that's available up on that website to date. So if it's legal and it's official, it's there.
That's cool.
Yeah. So I would say for now, let's just leave your bloodline blank.
Yeah. I'll look at that. I got it pulled up, so I'll look at that once we're done.
We can easily envision what a sorcerer fae bloodline is going to look like, and that ties that kind of thing in and gives you that really hard fae edge, which is okay. That's damn cool. But you may also decide that that you may want to go for something a little weirder, right?
I think I probably want to. I didn't know that was an option, so I think now that it's an option, I definitely want to go with something a little weirder because everything kind of seems to flow. Like the fae touched and the fortune teller and the sorcerer all make sense. So I'd like to have something weird and off.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so we've got the basic building blocks of your character down. That's awesome. The way you develop your stats is everything starts off as a base 10, and you go through each one of the categories. First, your ancestry, then your background, and finally your class. Each of those assign boosts. And a boost takes the form of a 2-point jump. So, like for example, let's look at gnome real quick. If you look at the gnome entry, it should give you a listing of which boosts it allows for, what areas that the gnomes are strong in, and perhaps what areas the gnomes are weak in, with a penalty, which comes at a -2 to that. And basically what you do is you go through each of these steps and you spend these boosts, you add on to the base 10 of your stats or take away from them in the case of a penalty. And when you're all done, you spend all of those boosts and your stats are as they are. We can go through that now, or you can do that later if you want. Being a sorcerer, your casting stat is your charisma. So charisma is going to be really important for you as a sorc, and you may want to decide, if she has a physicality to her, if she's strong, if she doesn't mind getting in a scrap, if she prefers to be more on the dexterous side of things, go for the high dexterity, harder to hit, more agile, more range kind of attackings. certainly you could go that route. So she sounds really cool. Is there anything else you want to share with us about Desna, or tell us anything about maybe if she's got a personality quirk or a mannerism or something, the way she interacts with other people, something that you're resonating with now that you want to share with us about her?
Well, I don't know. I haven't really like thought of anything specific as far as like personality quirks or anything like that. I just don't want to make her like, I feel like she could very easily be like a dark and brooding type with like the sorcerer and the fortune teller and stuff like that. And I don't want to make it too much any one way. You know what I mean? Because I don't want it to be too cutesy with the gnome, and I don't want it to be like too dark and brooding, and you know what I mean? So I'm kind of having a hard time like figuring out exactly what I want to do as far as her like personality, as far as her like little quirks or traits or whatever.
Yeah. That's understandable. Well, I would say think about the little things before you think about the big things. You know, what are the things that like, what are the small things that you notice first? Does she like to use her fortune telling to help people? Does she believe her gifts of fortune telling come because she has some responsibility to warn the world of things that are going to happen to them? Like, there's a couple different ways you could do it.
Yeah.
You could do it a little bit more sunshiny, that she believes that her fortune telling is connected to her Fae touched, you know, which is the first world is the world of the Fae. It's another plane that exists in a different place, but there are crossovers. There are gateways where things touch between the prime material and the first world, where the Fae cross in and out, etc. So maybe she believes that her fortune telling is empowered by the first world or the energies of the first world, and it's about being Fae. And instead of being a mischievous shit disturber like most Fae are, most Fae are very chaotic, and they enjoy nothing more than fucking with people. That's like their biggest joy in life, right? So maybe she has a different approach to it. Maybe she feels like her fortune telling is her way of balancing the scales and being a good Fae instead of another shitty Fae. You know, like that. There's a bunch of different ways you can go at it. And
I think the background of it too kind of helps me envision a little bit more of what I would want her to be. But it's just so hard. There's like so many different new aspects, and I'm like, I don't know the background of any of this. So I've been trying to do the little bit of research, and I'm like, okay, well, we're aligning with this deity and we're doing this, but it does get a lot. So that kind of does put me on the right track to kind of figure out what I want to do with it a little bit more. That makes sense.
Yeah, I love it.
The thing you have to remember, I think, overall too, Dana, is that there's no wrong way to create a character.
Mm-hmm.
Right. I mean, this is your character. I mean, I guess there is a wrong way as far as stats and whatnot, but as far as the background, the personality, and the you know, the things that you want. So, and I know you've played video games, and so I know you'll understand this concept, and I'm sure anybody watching this will know what I'm talking about, right? There are some people when they create, and I know this was my tendency when I first got back into role playing, to try and build my character in a min-maxing type of fashion where you want to maximize all of your abilities, and there's a part of my brain that still does that. That said, I also want to create a character that's telling an interesting story. And for me, in many cases, I will forego a min-maxing scenario in favor of a storytelling element.
Yeah. I think my main thing is I'm just struggling. I want her to have like flaws. Like I definitely want her to be a very flawed person, but I'm just struggling making the flaws not be like, I think that's more what I'm talking about, where I'm worried about getting it too like dark and gloomy. I don't want her flaws to be, you know what I'm saying? Like I don't want it to be like a tragic situation or anything like that. I just want her to be like a flawed, interesting character.
Sure. Which is why I suggested maybe doing the bloodline weirdness.
Right.
Which
I was already looking at them, and one of them said this is a tainted bloodline and was like an alien bloodline or something like that. And I was like, that's kind of cool. So I'm definitely interested in those. I think that's going to help me kind of lead the way into her. I think that's going to tie into her background a lot more too with the bloodline.
That's awesome.
I love it. I love it. Yeah, and we're eager to see how that pans out and what you end up deciding. I think that pretty much wraps the rift for Desna. Looking forward to see her in action. And as always, Busters, like the video, subscribe to the channel. Tell your friends. These are all preliminary videos leading into our game that will be starting very soon. The next video to follow after all the character riffs will be our session 0, where we sit down as a group. You'll see all of these players together with me for the very first time. We will sit down as a group and we will establish our social contract. I keep saying this in each one of these videos, that the session 0 is so important for all of us to map out and understand the boundaries of what we want to do, what's okay, what's not okay, what kind of theme we want to play, what kind of game we want to play. And it's a very important step that I believe a lot of GMs are overlooking, or perhaps thinking it's a burden instead of a tool that you can use to strengthen your games 1,000-fold. And we're going to show how that works. And every single Game Buster, every single Azmyth Busters group will all start the same way. You will see these character rifting videos, you will see a session 0, and then it'll lead into weekly play sessions. So thank you for joining us. Thank you for getting in on this early. This thing is going to grow and explode, and we've got a couple more. The next one is going to be Buster 1's character. Say goodbye.
Bye.
Bye, guys.